Hey everyone, and welcome back to Small Engine Edge. If you've been following along, chances are that you're thinking about starting your own small engine repair company. That or you've already been dabbling with it a little bit. Last episode we went over how to change your mindset from employee to entrepreneur. That's really getting your mind there is the very first step you should take in order to start your own small engine repair company. Now we're going to go over the tools that you're going to need to get there. If you've already been doing this a little bit, you may already have many of these tools. It takes a lot to run a small engine repair company tool-wise. If you're just starting out and you're just doing carburetor work or you're only working on certain segments, you may not need all those tools. But I'm going to go over exactly what all you're going to need at a bare minimum and some of the specialty tools you'll need if you want to do all things small engine. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button as we go along if you enjoy the content. Something like this cheap toolkit from Craftsman is all you really need to get started in small engine repair. Something like this and a few other basic hand tools, which I'll show you shortly, is all you really need. Start out doing tune-ups, start out doing basic repairs, carburetor cleaners, things like that. Whether you're just working on handheld equipment or whether you're working on, mowers and riding mowers and generators, power washers, snow blowers, any of that stuff, you don't need a whole lot to get started, and you can buy the specialty things as you go along. That's if you're doing it, without wanting to come out of pocket for any of this stuff. If you're doing it on a budget or on the side, that's the easiest way to start it. Build it up slowly, keep getting that customer base more and more, and keep getting more tools which will guide you to those other areas and allow you to do those other repairs. If you're gonna do it and just dive right in, one of the quickest ways to do that is go ahead and set up your business and everything and apply for a small business loan. You can do that pretty easily. There's government programs out there that will help you with a loan at a very low interest rate to get started. You will need a few things, and I will touch on some financial things here in the coming episodes. But if you're just starting out and you don't have a lot of tools, you can do it for a couple $100 to get you everything that you need to get started. And you can do it even cheaper if you buy things secondhand. Look on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, Nextdoor, places like that. Go to swap meets. There's many different places that you can buy these, auctions, everywhere else. But you can buy secondhand tools. You don't have to start off new, and you don't have to start off with anything expensive. You don't need to go spend $10,000 on the Matco or Mack truck in order to start a small engine repair company. Many of these things are exactly the same tools that you're going to get at Harbor Freight or anywhere else. Okay, there's lots of these guys out there that love to tell you that those Matco tools are wonderful and they'll last you a lifetime. Well, sure, a lot of those are good tools, but they're very, very high margin tools, and in my opinion, I think it's a waste of money. So this is probably one of the most basic sets out there. It's got kind of a little bit of everything in it. They are all 6-point sockets, which is what I would recommend. I would not recommend 12 points. They just don't grab as well, and you'll end up stripping out bolts as you're doing small engine repair if anything's rusted up. These are just chrome vanadium standard, not exactly real high quality or anything, but a good starting kit nonetheless. We still use a lot of this stuff, 1/4-inch drive. There's some 3/8 drive stuff up here also. Deep wells, you're gonna need deep wells, so both 1/4 and 3/8 stuff to get started. It's got a few hexes, both metric and standard, just something to kind of get you started. That's going to be great, a great set for that. It comes with a little screwdriver and some various torque bits and screwdriver bits and stuff. Nothing extensive. Good start though. This is all stuff that came out of my main box that I have all right out in the open that I use every single day when I'm working on pretty much any piece of equipment. Miscellaneous needle nose pliers. I like side cutters to cut fuel lines and different things. I like these Vice Grip Irwin pliers. They're great for grabbing onto things and getting a real good grip no matter what you're using. I use these 12-inch ones for grabbing onto oil filters. We've got spark plug wrenches here. There were spark plug wrenches in that other set. You can use those instead of something like this. A utility screwdriver. I like this to get up in the middle of jets of carburetors and remove them. It fits down in there well. An assortment of screwdrivers and picks will help you out, but you don't need anything fancy. You don't need to go buy some fancy stuff. Regular screwdrivers and flathead screwdrivers, something to drain some fuel into. You always need something to drain fuel into. You're gonna need a spark checker. Now I use this spark checker here as opposed to a inline spark checker. It's a lot easier, but these are kind of pricey. I wouldn't recommend going and getting one of these right off the top unless you're really diving in and wanting to spend some money, as goes with a lot of this stuff. This stuff here is a necessity, but many of the things I'm going to cover going forward, I'll let you know whether they are or not. Torch tip cleaners work great to clean carburetor orifices out. I use those a lot, but you can use something as easy as just a wire brush and pull the loom out and clean that all completely off also. You don't have to go, I mean, these aren't that expensive, but again, something you don't have to go real pricey with. This is a spark plug wrench just for your smaller equipment, your steels. It's got a T27 on the end, which is what most steels use to open. And then it's got two different size spark plug wrenches. There's a lot of these different ones for different brands and makes and models. This will help you if you're working on small two-stroke stuff. Same thing with double jointed needle nose pliers. These work to get down into the tanks and pull fuel line through. There's a lot of different fuel line pullers and hemostats and things that others use a lot. I always like the double jointed pliers. I do have a few different specialty tools for doing that, which as you go you'll learn once you start getting into this stuff. But they're homemade deals. They're not something where you're just going to go buy it. If you're working on riding mowers, you're going to want some crimpers. These work as a stripper and a crimper all in one, and then you can size your wire. This is a digital multimeter. It does DC volts, AC volts, and then it also does AC amps. They also sell ones that'll do DC amps, which will help at certain points with different things on riding mowers if you want to get one of those. I use this one the majority of the time, but I do have a couple around here that do DC amps. That helps out a lot. But this you'll use from anything from checking batteries to checking safety switches, checking stators and alternators and charging systems on riding mowers. Something that is a definite necessity, and they're not too expensive. I think probably around $30 for something like that. This is a cheaper one. Works just as well as the more expensive ones. And we've got a Lyle compression tester here. This is one of the cheaper compression testers out there, but it's one of the only ones. I bought dozens and dozens of these. It's the only one that seemed to really hold up. You know, a lot of these with the Schrader valve in the end, the Schrader valve seems to not seal well or something, and they just don't seem to work right. I went through a bunch of them. This cheap Lyle one that I finally bought is one of the best ones that I've had. Now we've got, if you're doing two-stroke stuff, you need carburetor adjustment tools. They sell kits of these on Amazon for a little bit of no money, but there's all these different adjustments on these carburetors. There's different things that you're going to need to adjust them. You will need a set of these adjustment tools. That's going to be a necessity for two strokes. You'll need a good bit set for working on different things. I like this Titan bit set. Comes with a complete assortment of hex, and then it's got some T's here, and then it's also got some Phillips head and some square bits. Got some different extensions and stuff. Then it's got a 5/16 and 3/8 and a quarter drivers. If you're going to be doing two-stroke, chainsaw chain sharpener. You'll need something like this. This works well, and it's cheap in order to sharpen chainsaw chains if you're going to do them by hand. It comes with different size file attachments and stuff. Otherwise, you can use a machine, which I'll show you here in a little bit. They're actually not too expensive at all either. Sharpening, mower blades. You can use either a grinder with a grinding disc on it. Otherwise, you can use just a bench grinder. Depends on how you want to do it. This is one of the more expensive ones, I'd say. Once you end up starting getting some power tools, you can go towards this, but they sell this same setup as a corded tool also, which we have quite a few of. That's where we started out with, is all the cheaper tools also, and kind of worked our way up. So you don't need expensive power tools to do any of this. Got the rest of my area here and the toolbox I use all the time. That's where all of those tools you just saw were pulled from, is right here at the top. Got a couple spark checkers over here. I've got a handful of those laying around. This is actually a vacuum or pressure tester used for bleeding brakes. We use it a lot for two-stroke stuff, to test carburetors and to test lines and things like that. You will need one for that type of work. That'll help you diagnose a lot quicker than without one. I've got a code reader here. That's not something you'll need. I haven't actually got a chance to use that yet, but for EFI stuff, it'll definitely help. This is just a load tester. See if I can get that up out of the trash can here. When you're working on riding mowers, if you clip them on, it'll tell you exactly what the condition of the battery is, what the voltage is. Does help out quite a bit in certain situations, and it'll tell you if a battery is good or not. We've got punches. You will need punches of some sort at some time. I've got also roll pin punches behind it. I don't use them nearly as often as I thought I would. This is all stuff that you could buy, you know, second hand pretty easily. A tachometer. Now, a tachometer is something that I didn't start off having one for quite a while. I learned pretty well, you know, what speed everything would run at without a tach. But really, to do things right, a tachometer is something you're going to need. Now, this one I've had ever since, you know, I think I maybe did this for a year or so without it. Bought this, and I've had this one ever since. It's the first one I've ever bought. We've got a couple other ones, but this one has not failed me yet. It's pretty beat up and stuff, has some oil all in the screen, but it still works very well. I think they're about $100, maybe a little bit more now. Buy one of those if you'd like. We've got ratcheting wrenches. Now, you're going to need some wrenches of some sort. The ratcheting wrenches will last a long time, but they are going to be a little bit more pricey than regular wrenches. You can buy ones with different flexible heads and stuff like that, or you can go with standard wrenches. I've got kind of everything just thrown in there, an assortment. Again, I don't really buy expensive tools. You know, all this stuff is on the lower end of things. As long as it's functional, that's all that's going to matter. You don't need to go out and you don't need to buy all these power tools. These power tools here are something you buy as you get larger and as you need those things, as they're going to save you time. Until then, do all this stuff by hand. There's no reason to go out and buy a $300 ratchet. This saves me a lot of time doing all the riding mowers I do, but it's not going to save most of you when you're starting out. It's not going to save much. That's money that could be better spent elsewhere. We've got some expensive, you know, Matco lights and Matco impacts and stuff like that. Again, not really any reason to do that. Some sort of an impact driver is going to save you a lot of time if you use it for doing things, but you've got to really learn as you go how to use that. Otherwise, it's going to cost you money. You're going to strip things out and break off bolts. I would say start slow with something like that. You don't need to buy, you know, a big expensive impact either. You can buy an air impact. An air impact is hardly anything. Of course, you will need an air compressor. That's something I'll talk about here shortly, but an air impact is going to save you a lot of money over a nice big impact, and it's going to do the same thing, or do it all by hand. Either way. Now, we touched on some of the other sockets that you'll need. You know, we've got a bunch of different ones, from small to large and deep well, standard. We use all this stuff a lot, but that's because I'm working on the bigger stuff. You probably aren't going to need this starting off. What I would recommend is going and grabbing a 15/16 or a 24, because you're going to need that if you're doing any of the MTD riding mowers. Basically stuff up to 1 inch is what you'll need. There's a few bigger things for some of the different mowers, but if you're going along and you find that you need it, get one. You know, you don't have to buy the full set. You don't have to go spend all that money straight up front. Same thing with the grease gun. You can use a manual grease gun for a long time. It does get real tiring, but you don't need to buy that right away. Something you could need down the road though. That's just to level decks out. You can use one of these. I didn't for years and years and years. Not really any reason to. You can use just a regular old tape measure to do it also. But if you want to spend a few bucks on that, it does make it a little bit easier sometimes to level decks out, to see exactly what height the blade is at. Safety glasses, definitely get you some of those. Now we've got different drivers and bits and stuff like that. We use this a lot to remove things with that impact driver. There's a ton of that. I mean, you can go for days and days and days and buy all these specialty tools. Spark plug gapper if you want to gap your spark plugs. A lot of this stuff though, like something like this, it comes free with aftermarket carburetors a lot of times. But you can use these to clean the carburetors. Going to need a set of feeler gauges. No matter what, you will need to adjust valves at some point. Even if you're only doing small, like 2-stroke stuff, eventually somebody's going to bring a 4-stroke weed eater or a 4-stroke blower in, and you're going to need to adjust the valves. Get you a nice set of feeler gauges. Here we've got a nice tire inflator. It works well for what we need it for, but I do a lot of tire inflation. You probably just need a regular old tire gauge and a regular inflator. You don't need to go spend the money on a fancy one like this. I've got big breaker bars down here, big wire brushes. That's a piece of the jack, the red thing in back, but these all work for removing flywheels. They work for prying on different things. Many kinds of different applications that we use big pry bars and things like that for. You know, get you a set of these smaller pry bars. That's probably all you're really going to need. I use a smaller tire iron, and that's what I used for years. Something like this, but just it was a little bit smaller gauge than that to get under flywheels and remove flywheels on pretty much anything. That's how I did them forever before I got pullers. An assortment of different hammers and large screwdrivers always helps. We've got a cylinder leak down test here. That will, if you're having issues with figuring out really any piece of equipment, you can use a leak down tester to figure out why that piece of equipment is not starting. This will help you go from, you know, being mediocre at small engine repair to really mastering it. So a leak down test, as you get better and better, will be a necessity. Taps and dies never hurts. You can have, you know, taps, dies, thread chasers, a lot of that different specialty stuff you'll use quite a bit if you're doing a lot of it. If not, you probably don't need a tap and die set, or will not need one very often. We use it, I mean, a ton. I've got all kinds of other sets, you know, different thread repair kits for spark plugs and different things that we use all the time. Torque wrench, something you will want to purchase. You'll need a good torque wrench. This is a foot-pound one. You can get an inch-pound one, or you can just use the foot-pound one and divide by 12 to get how many inch-pounds that you're looking at. We've got impact nut and bolt remover. I hardly ever use that. Internal Torx. On a lot of your Briggs stuff, you'll need an internal Torx or an e-Torx set to remove those studs. You can double nut it or use a pair of pliers normally to get it free. But again, I use that a ton. Something to just drill out sheet metal. Don't really use it hardly at all. These are different hex bits, just an external hex. Not very often needed, but all these specialty tools are something that are going to set you apart and make things easier for you. I've got a whole assortment of different drill bits and stuff. I bought that kit quite a while ago. I'm glad I did, because drill bits have came up a lot since I purchased that. I'm glad I got a good kit.
It's looking pretty bare right now, but we're limping it along for a little while longer. Slap hammer works well for removing different things, different applications. We've got a Allen hex set here. I don't use it too often, but every now and again I'll pull it out if I need a specialty size. Different set of some of my bigger Torx. Again, not something that's pulled out very often, but when I need it, I need it. Now, a fluid evacuator. I call it a oil extractor, whatever you'd like to call it. This one both has a manual pump and it has a pneumatic hookup on it. So you can remove oil from different things. When a lot of these smaller pieces of equipment, the oil plug, if you remove it, it'll drain it all over the deck. That's definitely not efficient. Without something like this, you're gonna go through a pain when doing a lot of oil changes on things. Buy one of these, whether it's a cheaper one or something like this, that's gonna help you a lot. They sell, you know, just tiny ones for $20. They don't work nearly as well, but they still will work exactly the way this one does. Got a digital caliper set here. It does both metric and standard. I use it quite a bit, measuring shafts and different things. Get you one of those. You know, there's so many specialty tools out there. We've got, you know, bearing presses, we've got blind hole pullers, gear pullers, large and standard, socket sets. You know, there's so many things you can go buy that you're barely ever going to use. You probably need a battery charger at some point if you're going to be working on riding mowers. Use that quite a bit for dead batteries, and then charge them up, test them with a load tester. You know, could you go buy an expensive Noco boost? Sure, but how often are you going to use it? How is that going to pay off for you just starting out? It's probably not. You know, we use ours all the time. I've got probably half a dozen of them, but we do a ton of different riding mower pickups and we move things around all the time. We need those. One will go dead during the day, we'll switch it out, charge up another one. You don't need to go buy an expensive Matco ratchet. You don't need to go buy all this expensive stuff. A Dremel tool, I do use it for different things. This is kind of a cheapo one, but cutting off bearings and doing different jobs with a cutting wheel, it works well for that. You don't need a good Sawzall or a hole saw or any of this other stuff. It's really just wasting your money when you're starting out. You don't need all that stuff. You know, we've got toolboxes full of different things, full of drill bits, full of old tools and tools that we originally started off with, specialty tools everywhere, toolboxes stuff full of all that stuff, but you don't need anything like that. The stuff that we just went over, not gonna hurt you to have a funnel, of course. A micro drill bit set. Now you can go out and buy one of these. It's about $20, $25 for this kit. Then we've got just a chuck for it here. We like it because we can size different jets, but you're probably not going to start off doing that. You're probably going to graduate up to that as you continue to learn the trade. Don't jump all into it at once. You'll always need razor blades for scraping gasket material. Nice blowgun for your air compressor. Use that to blow out tanks and get jets cleaned and everything else. Kind of the same thing over here. I've got a lot of the stuff that I don't use very often, just stuff full in this toolbox, corded tools, and I don't use a saw hardly ever, so it's shoved down there in the corner. There's a lot of those things. You buy them, and really, did you need to buy it right then? Probably not. Did you need it at all? Maybe not. Different spark plug wrenches. That's been years and years ago. I used to work off this table for quite a while. Bench vise, something that you will need. You'll use it quite a bit for different things. We've got a few of them around the shop. An ultrasonic cleaner for carburetors. You'll use it a lot and it'll help a lot if you're doing a lot of carb work, which everybody does a lot of carb work in this business. Buy yourself an ultrasonic cleaner as you get going. Not right at first. You can clean it by hand at first, but as you get bigger and bigger, buy you an ultrasonic cleaner. You will not regret that one. This is something, you know, that's just a little cheapo bench grinder. You can use it for sharpening blades as you start off, as opposed to going and getting a corded grinder or a cordless grinder. Start off like that. You don't have to buy the expensive blade sharpener like this. You don't need that blade sharpener. use just a regular bench grinder, and then get you a tabletop balancer. This balancer, it's a lot more expensive. I think they're about $100 last time I looked. But this up on the wall is a lot better than the other one. We like it. It works very well, and then it's got a thing so you can set it and figure out whether your blade's bent pretty easily. But you don't need all that to start. Use a tabletop balancer, use a grinder or a bench grinder to get started. You don't need this is just for filtration. We use it to kind of suck up all the dust that comes off the blade sharpener as we use it. An air compressor I previously talked about. You will need an air compressor. It doesn't have to be max volume. Most of the time you're not going to use a lot of that volume unless you're using a die grinder. And air impact will take a little bit of volume out of it, but you don't need anything expensive to start off. This one's been beat all to death. I paid a couple $100 for this thing used 7 or 8 years ago. I mean, it's been a workhorse for me, but you don't even need anything that big. You know, a cheaper, older Craftsman, I'd go with something that is not oil-free. The oil-free compressors seem to never last very long. They go bad very quickly. Get you something that has a oil lubricated compressor pump, and it's going to last you a long time. You can go out and buy you a welder. I've got just a Chicago Electric one here that uses argon. It's technically like a little cheapo homeowner unit, but I mean, I've used it commercially, and we use it a few times every week for quite big jobs. Again, you don't need the biggest, most expensive Matco or Miller or Lincoln welder to do something like this. Once you get into welding, go out and get you something that's halfway decent, pay a decent price for it, and it'll last you. I've got a DeWalt shop vac. I use it a ton for getting decks clean. It works great for me, but do you need a $250 shop vac? Probably not. Most of you, this isn't going to come in handy for you until you've been doing this a long time and until you're doing, 10 decks a day during the height of the summer. Don't waste your money on things that aren't going to pay off as you're working with them. Get them as you need them down the road. As we come to the back here, we've got just another cheapo bench grinder. It's also got the belt sander on it on the other side. And then we've got just a blade sharpener, Chicago Electric. Not pricey whatsoever, and they work very well. Something I would recommend because you're not going to spend very much money on this, and it's going to make you a lot of money off that blade sharpening.
Well, surely I missed something as I went through the shop here real quick. Comment down below if there's anything that you think I missed that should have been mentioned. Hopefully this helps you out with seeing the different things that you're going to need. Now, you can go out and spend tens of thousands of dollars on different specialty tools and things for different scenarios, and that doesn't mean that that's going to pay off in the end, though. Are you going to need those things? Drill press, shop press. Those are things that I've purchased over the years, and very, very rarely do I use them. I've got them sitting in the floor on the back as opposed to being mounted up somewhere because I use them so very little. Don't waste all your money on these things that may or may not be useful to you. Go, and as you go, figure out what exactly you're going to need to make things easier. If it's going to save you some time, it's worth the extra money to spend on those things. You don't need a big fancy toolbox. You can use different setups. I've got kind of a cheap roll-around toolbox over there. I've got the more expensive ones, but I like that box. It's something that I've used, and it's very, very convenient for me just to throw all my tools in it. And if I need to, I can just wheel it over to where I need to work at. I usually don't. I usually leave it wherever I've got it set up. I like the new area and everything, but I'm still kind of getting used to it. Hopefully this has given you a little bit of insight to the things you're going to need and showed you that you don't need, all of that money worth of tools. You don't got to go out and get a business loan and things like that to start a small engine repair company. You can do it for very, very little money. Again, swap meets and Craigslist and Nextdoor and Facebook, buying things from those places used is going to save you, you're going to get those things for a tenth to the fifth of the price a lot of times, especially if you go for older tools. They're no less useful than they were when they were made, as long as they're in good condition and not all rusted up. A lot of my stuff is secondhand tools that I got from my dad, 15 years ago. A lot of the stuff is just cheaper versions of things I bought as things have broken or as I've needed them. Do not go out and spend a ton of money on those tools. Now that we've figured out kind of what tools we're going to need, you're going to need a little work area. Figure out where your work area is going to be. You're going to need, if you've got a shed out back, hey, great. Get it all wired up though. You're going to need some good lighting. You're going to need to see things. If you're working out of your garage, same thing. When I started working out of my garage, I put up, first thing I did is went out and got 4-foot lights and put those up as opposed to just the 2 garage lights that I had out there. It helped me be able to see a lot of things. I don't know, just seems like when you start with doing those things as opposed to doing them later, that it saves you a lot of time and frustration because you're trying to do other things and you're not able to see while you're doing them. That slows you down a lot. Get that work area set up though, get the basic tools you need and grow from there. It doesn't take any of that money. If you're a retired guy, do it that way. If you're a young entrepreneur and you're wanting to just blow this out of the water real quick, sure, by all means, go get a business loan and start it off that way. A lot of times what they'll need for a business loan, you'll have to set up the business, which I'll talk about the whole filing and paperwork and everything here next episode to get the actual legal business going. You should be running your business legally. You should not be doing it off the books and under the table. You should have liability insurance, and there's a reason for that. You pay a little bit of money, but then you're covered. If anything crazy happens, God forbid that it does, but if anything crazy happens, you're not personally responsible for that, even if you're only doing it as a sole proprietorship. Sole proprietorship means you're just doing business. Your name is doing business as a different business name. That's all that means. That's how I started my company. I do not recommend going out and getting an LLC right off the top and starting that way. There's a lot of fees that are associated with that, and filing for taxes is a lot more expensive. My accountant has told me a lot of different legal things there, and no, I'm not giving you legal advice. Okay, I'm not an attorney or anything like that. This is just my opinion on how you should start this out. We'll go over a lot more of that next week though, with the legal part of things and getting business all set up so you can start with your first customer. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Dream big until next week. Hopefully we can get all of our goals accomplished in 2025 and beyond. Thanks for watching. Again, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed the content.